Welcome to the 5am podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders and influencers who are making headway and some waves in their industries. Today, we are privileged to speak with a filmmaker whose work has been stirring significant debate and discussion across the nation. Our guest is an award-winning director whose career has taken him from the silver screen to directing thought-provoking documentaries that have challenged the FBI and mainstream narrative. Most recently, he has directed the controversial and much talked about miniseries, The War on Truth. This 4-part documentary delves into the events of January 6, 2021, promising to uncover new evidence and challenge established narratives about what really happened that day at the Capitol.
You are suggesting that the violence at the Capitol on January 6th was part of some operation orchestrated by FBI sources or FBI agents. The answer is no, it was not.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
It's not protest, it's insurrection.
When I said how many agents or assets of the government were present on January 5th and January 6th and agitating in the crowd to go into the Capitol and how many went into the Capitol, can you answer that now?
I don't know the answer to that question.
You don't know how many there were or there were none?
I don't know the answer to either of those questions.
I think you may have just perjured yourself that you don't know that there were any.
Smoke pops, and when F starts to leave, he's got 4 people in front of him and 4 people behind him, and they literally get him the hell out of there.
Based on your investigation so far, do you have any evidence that the Capitol attack was organized by, quote, fake Trump protesters?
We have not seen evidence of that.
We need to go into the Capitol! I was in the front. I also orchestrated it.
Chris Burgard, thank you for joining us for 5am podcast.
Michael Klassen, you're very welcome, sir. Thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure to make your virtual acquaintance and to have this little conversation. It's always nice when we can stick it to the bad man. And I kind of feel like that's what you're doing. And in all seriousness, your films Border and Death County and The River of Broken Dreams both actually screened for Congress, correct?
Actually, yeah, I've actually had 3 films to screen for Congress: Border, Death County, The River of Broken Dreams, and The War on Truth, which is what the new miniseries is based on. We screened that for Congress back last September 20th.
Gotcha. So did those experiences of being able to screen those films before Congress, did that shape your perspective on kind of the intersection of filmmaking and politics?
Yeah, it did. The first time in 2007, they used Border as a grassroots tool to stop Bush's amnesty push that he was doing. The last 2 times going to Congress, it was very exciting. I was very honored to go there, but it was really disappointing because we brought them the first movie, Death County, The River of Broken Dreams. I made that with Tom Homan. We laid out how Joe Biden has started the largest child trafficking operation, maybe in the world, but that this country's ever seen, and how he did that started in 2015 in Central America. We had eyewitnesses in that. We had newspaper articles with quoting him, his picture, and Congress did nothing with that. And likewise, again, this last September, we went back and did The War on Truth. I had members of the Intelligence Services Committee say, we didn't know this. We just didn't know this. Well, are you going to open an investigation now that you have the information? No, we've kind of moved on. Tom Homan was there at Congress. He was angrier than heck after he saw The War on Truth. He said, why am I learning this from a movie instead of the law enforcement agencies that are supposed to be investigating and briefing us? And I hoped that would do something, and it didn't. Trump's in office now, so it's a different story. But what's really sad is I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I always thought that when I first started out, I thought if I just get the information down or present it to the people in charge and power, that they'd be able to fix this. And that's not really how it works. You have to pressure them into fixing anything. And so that's what I've done for 20 years. You make movies where you show them the truth, and then enough people get on board, you get to a tipping point of truth, and then hopefully things change.
Yeah, we really need to get to that tipping point. Last year, about a year and a half ago, I had the privilege of interviewing Tim Ballard, and his movie was
Sound of Freedom.
Yeah. How much, did you come across a lot of child trafficking in making these documentaries, or evidence of it, maybe I should say?
So, Michael, in the old days, when we would track the bad guys through the desert or through the pastures and here in South Texas, we catch the bad guys, it was usually dope they were running, big square bills of pot or heroin, speed, stuff like that. Starting about 2 years ago, when we catch the bad guys, it was kids. That was the cargo, was kids. For years, we didn't know really what we were running across. We would say we get these groups of smugglers with kids, and we would take the kids, and authorities would put them in these federal detention centers, these Fleet C detention centers, where we expected them to be repatriated with their families.
Yeah.
But that's not really how it worked. Up until during the Bush years, and not up until Bush years, and then again during the Biden years, there was no way of telling who their parents really were, because they come across that documentation. When President Bush was president the first time, they had DNA biometric testing. You had to take a DNA test, and if you got swabbed and your DNA didn't match those children, you didn't get those children.
Wow.
Joe Biden threw that out within the first 2 weeks of becoming president. And in the old days before him, during the Bush years and the Obama years, kids that we thought we rescued and saved ended up a lot of them just turned back over to the traffickers, and a lot of those kids are dead now. So that's been the biggest thing that's changed. And I don't want to gross your audience out, but the kind of evil that was happening every day on the border under Joe Biden is this doesn't have a place in civilized society. And we can't come together to protect children, then do we deserve to be blessed as a nation?
Right.
That's my question.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And what I feel is coming out of the work that you've been doing is we're so inundated with that Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution, and there's so much emotion that's forced on people. I know you don't want to get into the gory details, and I'm not asking for the gory details, but can you give us a snapshot that would lay waste to the emotional argument of why people should come across the border?
The left likes to say Trump put kids in cages.
Yeah.
Or cages that Obama built, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Or that Trump separates families. See, Trump separates children from their families. Well, okay. You want to say that? The Biden administration killed those children and put them into sex trafficking and indentured servitude. And people need to understand that they're only seeing parts of the border. This wave of humanity you see coming across the border, that's huge business. That's the cartels making more money off of selling women and children and pushing human beings than they are drugs. And it's so evil. I'll give you an example of how evil. I'll give you one example. So 2 summers ago, down here in Texas, a place called Eagle Pass, there was a couple coming up. I believe they were from Angola, and mom, dad, and they had a little 15-month-old baby. And they're coming across the river. Dad's got the baby piggyback up on his back. And they come across the river. The current gets them and knocks them down. They start to drown. Dad does drown. Border Patrol comes in. They save the mom. They save the baby. The baby is unconscious. She's not breathing. They get her breathing again. They life flight her to the hospital, where she dies. And 4 physicians examined her, and she had been anally and vaginally raped so many times. It was just all tore up down there. There was nothing separating the two. And that's what really killed her. And they found out after investigating the people that were in that group with these immigrants was that that was part of the price they paid to get their daughter, or to get the whole family across the river, was let the cartels do this to their daughter. They seem to enjoy that down there. They have a hunger for that. They think it's fun. And that's evil. That's evil on a level. And I've sat with women who have been raped on the border. We were the first people that we discovered started reporting on rape trees 20 years ago. And I've been with women that have been just so tortured and abused that they're never going to be the same. And I thought that was evil. And then going down like this story with this little girl, that's evil.
Yeah.
But what's more evil is when I talked to the medical examiner, and this medical examiner is like, I'm under a gag order from high up. I'm not allowed to speak to you about this case. But Chris, I can talk to you about the other 3 children I have laying in my morgue right now. If you want to talk about dead children coming across the border. So as evil as what the cartels did to that small child, how evil are the government officials in the in the Biden administration that knew this was going on and purposely made orders to keep it quiet from the public? Because if America knew about this, we would have sealed the border years ago.
Yeah.
That's the kind of evil we've been dealing with in this government. And those are people that are being paid their wages by our tax dollars.
Yeah.
That's how this whole system has been working.
Wow. So can you take us back through the moment you decided to create the War on Truth?
Sure. My partner and I, Nick Searcy, had made a movie called Capital Punishment. Everything they told you about J6 was a lie. We were in D.C. on January 6th. Just had a big, hard calling to be there, just really on our hearts. And so we showed up there. I was there with myself, Nick, my wife, my daughter. And we didn't plan on making a movie about that day, but I'm a filmmaker, and it's an important day in history, so I just filmed everything we saw. As did Nick, as did my daughter. And then when they started to steal the narrative, and it was so apparent that this was an operation, we had the opportunity to make a movie about it, and we said we should because we needed to capture that day in history. They'd steal it. So after we made Capital Punishment, it was arguably the most censored movie of 2022. I was back down on the border making another movie about the border with Tom Homan, Death County, the River Broken Range. I get back to my ranch in Texas, and people have been after us to make a sequel, but I didn't feel it because so many people were reporting on January 6th now that it didn't seem like it was necessary. Well, that's how God's funny is. When he wants you to do something, he whispers in your ear. If you don't listen, he taps you on the shoulder. If you don't listen, he punches you in the stomach. Well, my gut punch was when the FBI came a quarter mile into my ranch to investigate me as a terrorist threat as the United States of America.
Wow.
So that puts some pressure on your family. I asked my girls if I should quit doing this stuff because I didn't want to put them through this. And my daughter's like, no, Dad, I want to have a family. You got to do this. You got to win. So after we got things a little bit settled down, because it was a little Western for a while, the FBI tried to go around my attorneys and just get me to come in and just to have a quick conversation.
Yeah.
I've done 3 projects with Michael Flynn. I see what happens. I saw what you did to him when you said he allegedly misspoke and how he was looking at 7 years in federal prison. I didn't want to go down that road.
Yeah.
So after we got it quieted down, my buddy Nick is like, well, if they're doing this to you, an award-winning filmmaker who's worked with law enforcement for over 20 years, what are they doing to other people out there? And that's how we did the War on Truth. And when we first started making the War on Truth, we were dealing with so many people that were Christians, and some of which had been in prison for over 2 years waiting for trial.
Wow.
And that's not supposed to happen in the United States of America. Down here, we have right to a speedy trial, which means within 70 days, not over 2 years. And we asked Pastor Rob McCoy, it's like, is this a war on Christianity? And he's like, yes and no. It's a war on truth, but as Christians, we're called to speak the truth, so that gets us in the way. And then what we documented throughout the movie was when you set out to fundamentally transform the United States of America from a free republic into a Marxist state, the first people you need to get rid of are those that believe their rights come from God, not bureaucrats. And that's how we got into the whole War on Truth. And what you're going to see in this movie and the miniseries, it'll just blow you away.
Now, you said something very important, and it stems from the truth that America is not a democracy, but a republic.
Correct.
And it is one nation under God, and it's not the theosophists or other things. It is actually the God of the Bible. Can you talk about how it sounds to me like you had a quest for truth to see the light of day? Like I'm envisioning this in my mind. I've got a lot of imagination rolling around up there, but you're realizing that you have this particular set of skills. And was there a point where you felt like, you talked about the gut punch, and the Lord knows how long it takes somebody to get the message and to start acting on it. So just with those particular set of skills, you must have felt that this was actually a calling from God to put this truth out there.
110%. And that's, when I started doing all this, I was raised a Catholic, went to Catholic high school, always believed in God, always did, but I was never comfortable talking about it or literally praying in public or anything like that. You just didn't do that. But when I first did Border in 2005, things happened that was just like the hand of God coming down. There's no other way to explain it. We'd actually gotten in with some cartel guys in south of the border, Mexico, and they surrounded the car, and I didn't think we were going to get back. We did. That was one such moment. I was in Central America covering the attempted coup in Honduras, and I've never had this happen before, but I actually heard God's voice. I was in the middle of talking to my crew. We're going over some footage in the hotel room, and a voice said, "Go out in the hall." No one else around. Get in the hall. So I go out in the hall. Okay, turn right. Go this way. And just as I do that, a door opens up, and this guy comes out with this woman, and they look at me, and they shut the door, and they go back in. So I walk around a little bit more, and then the voice says, "Get in the elevator. Get in the elevator." I don't even know where I'm going. So I go to the elevator. I get to the elevator. Well, this guy and that same woman get in the elevator with me. And obviously, I'm an American. I'm stand out a little bit.
Yeah.
And turns out that he was a congressman down there, and that woman wasn't his wife. And it was in the afternoon in a hotel. And because of whatever happened in our meeting in that elevator, he gave me numbers to the U.S. ambassador and some other people that allowed us to follow the story down there that took it to a whole different level. Wow. And we were able to put out news to America and the world that no one else is covering, that completely blew apart the false narrative down there. Wow. So that kind of set me, that's like, okay, Lord, you got my attention now. And it's been a journey of faith. You know, I remember the moment my wife and I were sitting in our kitchen back in our old ranch saying, okay, Lord, show us what you want me to do. You know, do you want me to go? Because I was riding bulls and having a lot of fun and doing stunts, and I was coming on 40 years old. And my wife's like, you need to go back to making a real living. Man, within a couple of weeks of that prayer, I was in France at the Cannes Film Festival selling a movie I directed, and then I got back, and then I was on the border. I'd never made a documentary before, and God just threw me in there. And what I see is, what I've learned over 20 years is you can't just tell people the truth. You have to show them.
Yes.
And that's why my movies have been so dangerous to the deep state, because when you show people the truth, changes liberals that saw our first movie, Capital Punishment, they didn't cry, not all of them, some of them didn't cry when Ashley Babbitt died, and they went through that, but they cried a few minutes later when her dog died. That was their trigger point. That just made them melt down. Yeah. And when that happens, the scales fall from their eyes, and they're like, oh my gosh, they've been lying to me this for so many years. What else are they lying to me about? And in the War on Truth, we took it to the next level. War on Truth is even more serious. A little bit of humor and levity that we used to weave the first stories together in Capital Punishment. Couldn't do that in the War on Truth. It was a whole different ballgame. But when you're doing things that are pointing out who the architects of January 6 are, who real investigators need to look at the highest levels of our government, what they've done in countries to overthrow governments in other countries, and how that was rehearsal for January 6th, it's really going out on a limb, and it's been scary. It's been a lot of pressure on my family and crew members that worked with us on these things. We had people quit and couldn't work with us because you start doing these films and things start happening. It's just unfortunate. But
so
it's
you're saying then that the same tricks in the playbook that have been used by letter agencies or some sort of agencies to overthrow governments in other nations were actually being used in America on January 6th?
110%. It's called Color Revolution, but it's an older playbook than that.
Okay.
There's a guy named Master Sergeant Jeremy Brown that was supposed to have been released a few weeks ago when Trump gave all the pardons. Yeah. They walked him all the way to the front door of the prison, and the Bureau of Prisons changed their mind and kept him and let everybody else loose. Master Sergeant Jeremy Brown was the poster soldier for Green Berets for many years. He's a 20-year Green Beret veteran, highly decorated, ran for Congress. They couldn't get him on anything he did on January 6th when they investigated him. But when they raided his house, his motorhome was parked about a block and a half down the road. They found a CD full of supposedly top secret documents, which in court turned out not to be top secret. They threw that out, and 2 hand grenades. And they busted him for having hand grenades and top secret documents. Now, the way these hand grenades are, there's a piece of adhesive tape on each one of them. They found human DNA and matter, and they found dog hairs attached to this. But it wasn't his DNA, and it wasn't his dog's dog hairs. Now, he has 2 big dogs, they're Australian Shepherds. They shed a lot.
Yeah.
You're going to be taking a trip in a motorhome with adhesive tape and hand grenades on it. That dog hair is going to get on it. It wasn't on it. So his attorney, Colonel Carolyn Stewart, she's former military intelligence, she absolutely believes with 110% that those hand grenades were planted previous to the raid or during the raid. He's still in prison. And I asked Jeremy, I said, at the time when I first met him, I said, you've been in prison over 2 years waiting for trial. Why is this happening? And he said, Chris, you have to understand, the United States government spent millions of dollars training me on how to take down a country from the inside. That's what I did all over the world. If I wasn't in prison now, I'd be out on every podcast, every radio show, talking to every journalist I could, explaining to them how the government was stolen that day on January 6th, what happened, how they did it, and what's going to happen next. So that's the kind of stuff we run into. And you can tell how high the cover-up goes just by the lies that they tell and how high the lies go. And this is an old playbook. There's a guy named Joseph Goebbels who used to work for a fellow named Adolf Hitler.
Yes.
And what he said was, if you make the lie big enough and tell it often enough, it becomes truth to the state and thus to the people. So look at the people that are lying about January 6th. Look how high up it goes. Let's just take one in particular.
Yeah.
And this was said by Merrick Garland. It was said by Christopher Wray, the entire Biden administration, Joe Biden himself, and mainstream media. They repeated over and over that on January 6th, 5 law enforcement officers died. 5 law enforcement officers were killed on January 6th. That's a complete lie.
Yes.
Officer Brian Sicknick died of natural causes the next day. His head was not bashed in by Trump supporters with a fire extinguisher, which was the story they ran with for months, even they know that was untrue in the very beginning. He died the next day of natural causes. The other 4 law enforcement officers that died weeks and months after January 6th of suicides. I mean, let that sink in.
Yeah.
You die of a suicide months after an event and it's contributed to January 6th. So why would they lie about this at the highest levels? Well, because it not only puts forth a certain agenda to make those people bloody insurrectionists, terrorists, dehumanizes them, separates the country, but it also covers up who really died that day, which were 4 Trump supporters: Benjamin Phillips, Kevin Greeson, Roseanne Boylan, and of course Ashley Babbitt, of which, there hasn't been any investigation into how Roseanne Boylan died, even though eyewitness testimony says that the 3rd strike with a wooden stick by Officer Lila Morris is what they believe killed her. No one's looked into the heart attacks that happened to Kevin Greeson and Benjamin Phillips, even though one of them, and you see this in the miniseries, The War on Truth, you see him, he's just standing there on the other side of the protest. He's just standing there watching, and a grenade is launched over from the Capitol building, goes over the crowd, hits him in the chest, explodes, burns the face of the guy next to him. He turns away, screams, his face is burned. This guy goes down, and his heart stops. They put him on a gurney. They're doing CPR, and he dies. They can't get him back. That needs to be investigated.
Yeah.
And the shooting, you're going to see the shooting with Ashley Babbitt. Every military and law enforcement agent and intelligence agent in the movie and in the miniseries, none of them think that was a good shooting. Doesn't pass the smell test. And what you're going to see in the film and the miniseries with Ashley Babbitt is footage you've probably never seen before that showed her up to seconds before she died. Remember, she was a 14-year military veteran. Yeah. She was upholding her oath to defend the Constitution, defend the Capitol building. She grabbed the largest, most violent person in that hallway. His name was Zachary Allen. He was trying to break through the window with a military helmet. She grabs him. He pulls away. She grabs him again. She clocks him with the left hook, knocks his Buddy Holly glasses off his face just as they yell, "Gun, gun," and then she panics and goes to that window where she's shot and killed.
Oh, wow.
She died a hero, but yet look at how much they went out of their way to make her seem like a terrorist. That's the stuff that history will eventually show as this comes out.
And you telling these stories is going to bring out a lot of emotion in the viewer. And I understand that Tom Homan, the new border czar, now he viewed a different documentary, correct?
Yeah, Tom and I did. We did Death County and the River of Broken Dreams together. He's an awesome guy. So when we screened for Congress in September, he came to the screening to see The War on Truth.
Gotcha.
And he was just livid. He was so angry, and he was so upset about what was being done to American citizens in what was definitely a psychological operation run with military precision.
Yeah.
He was so upset, and he's like, "Why am I learning about this information from a movie instead of the investigative agencies or the bureaus that are tagged with protecting America and providing us with the information we need to run this country. He was just livid. And I will tell you, we actually filmed part of that, his statement, and put it out as a paid advertisement. And Mark Zuckerberg, he kisses the ring with Donald Trump, and says he's going to support him, and he's all for free speech. Well, within, minutes of that commercial coming up on Facebook, they killed the commercial, censored it, and charged us 2 cents for running that ad. So they censored Tom Homan, the border czar, for putting out a church movie about January 6th. That's the reality of what Facebook and Zuckerberg are doing right now.
Wow. I was in a meeting in a Hollywood building office space room, and there were some guys in an alcove off to the side. They were counting the take from the meals, and it was late at night. The curtain was drawn. All we could hear was people talking, and you could hear the sound of money and change going around. Everybody knows what that sounds like. The only reason I bring that up is because the comment at our table was made, and there was a couple of Hollywood, professionals there that had been around, VP level kind of stuff. And the comment was made, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And it sounds to me like there could be some people behind the curtain who would get very nervous at what you've put out in the past and what's coming out. And we've already talked about your unfortunate run-in with the FBI. Can you talk about how that experience maybe emboldened you to pull back the curtain?
Well, emboldened. Good choice of words. I don't know if it's emboldened as much as left without a choice. In my life, sitting back and waiting has never served us well. Going on offense did. Really, you're going to come after me, a 62-year-old award-winning filmmaker who's had movies play for Congress, whose father was law enforcement his entire life, whose father graduated from the 109th session of the FBI Academy, I've always had a great respect for the Bureau. You're going to come after me. And then what they did was, this is what cemented it for us. I told them initially, I'll come in for the interview, but I want to bring my attorneys. I want to film the whole thing. Can't be taken out of context. So I gave them the number of my attorneys. My attorneys got hold of them. The FBI went around their backs to call me, and they said, "Oh, we're just the next county over. Just come on down to CID, and we're just going to have a little conversation."
Just about one.
And I called them back, and I said, "Seriously, this is not my first rodeo. You know who my father was. You know who I've worked with." I said, I can't believe you did that. I was extending you professional courtesy. That's done. Just talk, So that's why the attorneys took over and worked some stuff out. So it's not a matter of being emboldened. It's not a matter of being brave. It's just you get into it, and the only way through it is forward. Yeah. You win, or that's it. You save this country, or there is no.
That's right.
As Ricky Bobby would say, if you ain't first, you're last.
That's right. And it's so important to that line that you said, the only way through is forward. And that's something that Americans need to keep in mind as this attempted coup. They couldn't put it all together. They couldn't put all the pieces into the basket. I wanted to ask how you see your documentary influencing future investigations or maybe policy decisions, not necessarily related to January 6th, but do you think that you can move the ball down the field towards
I think
freedom?
It's already been moved down the field.
Yeah.
For years we were trying to get the movies to President Trump, and I don't know that we ever did. People very close to him, some of his attorneys, some of his inner circle had the movie. But I can tell you, just before the pardons and in a press conference before he took office, he was using language, especially about the deaths, who died, and the lies covering up, that was right out of our movie. So people were coming to us and goes, "You seen your movie? You seen your movie?" I'm like, "Well, relax. It could have just been a brief from a staffer."
Yeah,
but the point is, yes, the information that we put out seems to have reached the highest levels, and hopefully it'll have a positive impact.
Yeah. That's good.
I can't tell you what it's like to sit here now. I was trying to tell you about the pressure on my family. One of the things that we show, and we go into a little bit of depth in it in the War and Truth miniseries, is who the architects of January 6th are, or at least who enough evidence that they should be investigated by somebody with a lot higher pay grade than myself.
Gotcha.
And 3 people that I got this information with over 4 years, 2 of the 3 are now dead.
Wow.
So to hear Bobby Kennedy, and basically what we said is, at the time, nobody believed that we helped overthrow the Ukrainian government in 2014.
Absolutely.
That they thought it was a conspiracy. And what we were saying was, look at the Americans and the people in our intelligence services and our State Department that helped overthrow the Ukrainian government in 2014, and see if that wasn't a dress rehearsal for J6. And we named names. And at the time, people thought, that's crazy. You can't be saying that. Well, since then, it's come out, and even Obama admitted it. Yes, we did work to overthrow that government.
Yeah.
And two, now just last week, you had Bobby Kennedy naming Victoria Nuland, and she's one of the people that we named that needs to be investigated, coming out and saying she had a big hand in overthrowing the Ukrainian government. Okay, so half of what we've been saying was just validated. I can't tell you that pressure that takes off of us, takes off my family, because we've always said the truth will come out. How fast it'll come out, we don't know. But it will come out. And I'm God willing, these films will stand to testament as the truth of what happened in those moments.
That's right. And for our listeners, regardless of where they place themselves on the political scale, there's the disparaging mark that comes out of the Frankfurt School of far right, but it's actually right so far. And so I definitely encourage you to, not that you need my encouragement to keep going, but you've been right so far. And I think that the Lord's going to continue to put you in the right place at the right time. And
I'm hoping he's going to let us rest a little while first.
Good.
I feel like we kind of blew the shofars, and now the army's marched into battle.
Yes.
You couldn't ask for President Trump to hit the ground running any faster than he has. And just a slightly different note, you probably don't know this about me, but when I got blacklisted in Hollywood, I ended up working for Herman Cain when he was running for president. I was one of his earliest hires. And I'll never forget the day he was ambushed by Politico, and they went after him, and they tried to push this whole thing that he was, basically, doing some pretty nasty, adulterous things. And it wasn't true, but they kept after him. I was like, this isn't journalism. And I remember the day I remember how he smelled. I remember how he looked, the reporter that came after Herman, how he waylaid him, how he ambushed him out there. And then to see as they cut off, they closed down and they investigate USAID, you see they gave Politico $38 million. Okay, guys, so for those of us who have been telling you for 20 years, the intelligence services are running the mainstream media. Now do you believe us? Right. Now do you see how, they used intelligence services, used Politico to knock a good man out of the presidential race.
Yeah.
That is the reality of what's been going on. And there's something else, Mike, I want people to know, because I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, no, that's good.
But as bad as January 6th was, and it was a complete success for the people that planned it, and they wanted to do two things. The first thing is they had to stop any investigation in the contested ballots in the swing states. That worked beautifully because, as you'll see in the TV series, inside the Capitol building, they just voted for the first round of transparency. They're going to investigate the first state. Then all of a sudden, a flare goes up over the Capitol building. The breach happens. They break down. They get out of the Capitol for over 3 hours. When they come back, there is no investigation. It's done. It's gone. So that worked brilliantly. The second half was to divide America into two and to try to dehumanize half of America as violent insurrectionists, so you could do things like, suspend their rights, throw them into prison for 2 years waiting for trial. Yeah. That's where we have been. That now is being all turned on its head. But what would have changed America, and I don't know that we ever would have come back from this, was what the plan actually was. And the plan actually was to have hundreds of dead Americans inside the Capitol building, blood running down the hallways. And it was stopped by one man, a guy named Lieutenant Tariq Johnson. And you can hear TK. He was a lieutenant that day. He had a lot of people under his command on the ground. And as Tariq says, on that day, everybody on the ground was set up. The MAGA supporters were set up. The Capitol Police were set up. Wow. And you hear him on the radio for 20 minutes. He's asking for permission from his supervisor, Yogananda Pittman, who you also see is the person responsible for blocking all the intelligence reports that were coming in, from getting to Chief Sung to getting the guys on the ground. There never would have been a January 6th if she wouldn't have purposely blocked this information, this intelligence. So he's on the radio for 20 minutes requesting from her permission to clear the House chambers and the Senate floor. 20 minutes, she doesn't answer. So finally he says, okay, I'm making the call on myself. We're going to evacuate the Senate chambers, and then we're going to evacuate the House floor. Why this is important? Capitol Police use of deadly force continuum is that if you're defending senators, congressmen, bodies, you can shoot to kill.
Wow.
If they're gone and you're just defending real estate, you're not allowed to shoot anybody. You're not allowed to kill anybody.
Right.
So had Johnson done this 20 minutes earlier, Ashley Babbitt would still be alive because the rules of engagement would have changed. Byrd never would have been allowed to unholster his weapon.
Wow.
Had he not done it or done it 20 minutes later, then all those people you saw streaming into Congress, in the House and in the chambers, they would have been dead. They would have been shot and killed, and you would have had all their blood running down the hallways of Congress. And I don't think that's something we would have recovered from.
Yeah.
Those visuals would have been too much for anybody to hear an argument about. And so that's where we're heading. And I hope that the truth, I'm confident the truth will all come out. I hope that there will be a real investigation. I don't believe it's going to come from Congress. I haven't seen the Capitol will, or the will on Capitol Hill to do that, but maybe the military. I would advocate for televised Nuremberg-style trials. Wow. That's what you need for this, because when you have a coup, that's treason. Yeah. You need to investigate it. You need to put people on the stands.
Wow. Well, that is a very serious note to end off on. I know we both have to go, and I hate to cut this short because we're having a great conversation, but Chris, a sincere thanks for joining me today for 5 a.m. podcast.
Well, God bless you, Michael, and thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure. And thank you to our viewers, too, for joining us today. And we will be so bold to ask that if you could be so kind as to share this conversation with your networks out on the social media platforms that so many people are on these days. They need to see the truth show up in their feeds. And so, as we've already heard, they do like the censorship, and we want to pull down those curtains and share these stories of truth. We do one more thing. Head over to 5ampodcast.com and throw a few bucks in our Buy Me a Coffee cup. We would appreciate that, as would our dog Bailey, because he needs some new treats. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm Michael Klassen.